Welcome to another special report from Catholic Family News, and I am delighted today to be joined by a guest who is there for his first time joining us in a video interview, Dr. Peter Kwasniewski, but he should be very familiar to many of you, particularly if you subscribe to the paper, because he has been contributing to the newspaper for some time and publishing some really important articles, most recently on his journey to the traditional understanding of Catholicism where he is today. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Brian.
But today we're going to talk about a project that you've been involved with, and I don't know when you find time to sleep. You're involved in so many projects and public speaking and books. But this is a project for a resource for those who respond to the call of Archbishop Vigano that we have a right and an obligation to find priests who will offer the Mass in the traditional form, what he calls the Catholic rite. But for many of us who have found our way to the traditional rite over the years, it is often something we need some assistance with, because we've with the faith and liturgy dumbed down so much. We often our intellect tells us this is right, but there's a gap there, and we say, well, wait, we need something to help us in this transition. And so there's an important project that has been launched, which is called Benedictus, which is a monthly subscription service. And you can see here the March the March issue of Benedictus for, I think, as little as $5 a month that I saw. Is that right?
That's right, yes.
That's incredible. For, as you can see, 124 pages, I think this issue has. So maybe could you begin by telling us what is the goal of this project? Why was it launched?
So the purpose of Benedictus, as the very name suggests, is to be like Magnificat, which is very famous worldwide, but for the traditional Mass, for the traditional breviary, and with traditional sources. So essentially, it is the daily companion, the monthly daily companion. But what you'll get in it is the Latin Mass with all of its propers, all of its prayers. You'll get meditations from classic authors, from church fathers, and from mystics, and from poets. You'll get commentaries on feasts, on the fasting seasons, all this sort of thing. Ideas for catechesis at home, ideas for home devotions and celebrations, but all of it keyed to the traditional Latin Mass. And that, I think, is a crucial boon because there are so many people, as you know, so many people coming to the Latin Mass, especially in 2020. I think we've seen the biggest surge in new attendees in 2020 of any time since about 2007, when Summorum Pontificum came out.
Yes, no, I think it's one of the things this global pandemic has done has been a boon to tradition. When the churches were shut, many people I know who maybe didn't even know about the traditional Mass just found an open church and didn't care what it was. But
yes, an open church and a reverent manner of distributing and receiving our Lord in Holy Communion.
Yes,
and serious preaching that didn't seem to be muzzled by the state or by the deep state, deep church. That it's. I think that people find, actually, a lot of people, as you say, they come for all kinds of good reasons, and then they fall in love with the liturgy.
Yes.
Subsequently to that.
Yes.
But as you also said in your introductory remarks, the traditional Latin liturgy is a rich, complex, subtle, grand piece of art. It's been called the greatest work of art in the history of Christendom. Yes. And it is. It's a kind of a totality of prayer and chant, and it's in Latin, and it's full of rubrics and mysterious symbols and gestures. It's not transparently obvious to us, and it's not meant to be, and it shouldn't be, because we'll never understand divine worship, even if it's all in English. We deceive ourselves into thinking that we understand it, but we can come to understand it more and more. It's a lifelong journey. And I've been studying this for decades, and I'm still learning new things every day. It's so exciting. It's so rich, our tradition. And so Benedictus, to get back to this publication, it's really meant as a tool for helping everyone in different ways. We can go into the different ways it can be helpful, but it's a tool for helping everybody to access these riches, not so as to make them obvious. They're never obvious, but just to bring them closer and to make them more nourishing to the spiritual life of the faithful. Really what I would describe it as is a resource that's very much in keeping with the original goals of the good part of the liturgical movement, right? Make people familiar with the treasures of their own inheritance, so that it's not just a closed book, right? Oh, it must be good because the church approves it, but I have no idea what it says. No,
Yes.
that's not, I don't think that's the right relationship for us.
So you mentioned each month includes the prayers that change with each Mass for the traditional Mass, which what are called the proper prayers.
Yes.
So are those provided in Latin and English? And if so, where's the English translations come from?
Exactly. So here's, I think that, you know, I'm one of many people involved in this project, just in a consulting capacity, just to discuss ideas. And one of the difficulties, you know, you put on the screen the sample issue for March. That's just a sample issue for 1 week in March.
Wow.
And the actual monthly issue will be about 400 pages, but very thin paper, just like the Magnificat, if you've ever picked up a copy of that. So it's not going to be a giant book, but it's going to have a lot of content in it for each month.
Wow.
And in order to get it to that point, so there were two important decisions made. One decision was to make it as totally user-friendly as possible. And this will be really great, not only for newbies, but also for, let's say, parents who have a lot of children, you know, that they're trying to organize in the pew, and they maybe, you know, they don't, you've seen it, right? The big missal, it gets dropped, it gets ripped, you know, it's hard to put the ribbons in. So this you
need about 5 hands, 4 to hold the children and 1 to hold the missal, and then you can't turn the page, right? Yes.
But so the decision was made with Benedictus that for every Sunday and High Holy Day, the whole Mass is printed out from start to finish with no page turns. So from Intro Ibo ad altari Dei to, you know, Deo Gratias after the last Gospel, it's all printed out for each Sunday and Holy Day of Obligation. So no page turning required for those days, and that's in Latin and in English, with the English parallel columns, with the English coming from Father Lasance's Missal primarily. From 1937. So nice traditional language. You know, Lasance's Missal is one of the classics. But for the weekday Masses, those are all there as well, but they're just in English, just the propers in English, right?
Okay.
And that, I think that's a good compromise made, because if you try to put absolutely everything in for every day, then at that point you're just at a daily missal, like a Baronius Missal or a St. Andrew's Missal or a Lasance's Missal. And if that's what you're looking for, just get one of those, right?
Yes. So the Sundays and Holy Days, it's all integrated, so no page turning and Latin English. Then other lesser feast days or ferias, you have a little flipping back and forth.
Well, yeah, I guess the thought there would be, if you're attending daily Mass, the main thing that you need to know is what the propers are.
Yes.
And of course, we know that the vast majority of people attending are going to be attending on Sundays and Holy Days. So that's really where the weight is put in terms of, you know, printing everything.
So in addition to the text, you mentioned the liturgical movement, and obviously Dom Guéranger, the great Benedictine, is the really emblem of what was good about the original liturgical movement. So are there equivalents to Dom Guéranger's kind of commentary or explanation of the Sundays and feasts, or that accompany them?
Yes, exactly. So in Benedictus, you'll have, let's say, the prayers of the Mass, and then there will be a meditation from Dom Guéranger, or from Cardinal Schuster, or from let's say, I don't know, from Faber, you know, in England, Father Faber, you know, one of these classic authors, almost entirely pre-20th century, although some 20th century authors prior to the Second Vatican Council, who's going to talk about the gospel of the day, or maybe talk about the collect of the day. So there's definitely a kind of liturgical meditation woven into the whole issue, which I think is wonderful, because, as you know, that when you look at these Masses, they're very ancient. The combination of the prayers, the readings, it's a very ancient work of art, and there's so much that we can derive, so much spiritual fruit that we can derive from meditating on these texts. So the classic commentaries in there are in service of that. But also it has, I think I did mention this in passing, but I also want to emphasize that it has morning and evening devotions as well that are extracted from the breviary, the Roman breviary of 1960. So that might be something like the Gospel Canticle, the Benedictus or the Magnificat, together with its proper antiphon from the Gospel of the day. So again, families, I think this is a very family-friendly publication because, you know, I've talked to a lot of families, and this happened in our family too. They want to know, how can we extend prayer from the liturgy into the home, right? And for a lot of people, if you just sort of thwacked onto the table the whole Roman breviary and said, here, this is your prayer book, they would freak out. They wouldn't know what to do. And it's too much in most cases. But if you had some morning or evening devotion that you could do with the children, you know, that's exactly the kind of thing that Benedictus is trying to encourage, but always tied in to the Mass in that way.
And obviously the church has always known that we are, you know, creatures who are not just intellectual. We do have a body, we do have senses, and that liturgy really needs to speak to all of that. Again, it's interesting. One of the comments that I've made about the new Mass is that it is incredibly abstract in many ways.
Yes.
It's all focused on text.
Exactly.
But I noticed just from the little image we had, there seems to be an attention to not just text, but to art as well. It was kind of a beautiful picture on the front. So what role does visual art play in the text?
Yes, and I mean, I have to say, you know, I think generally speaking, over the years, Magnificat has set a great example in this regard, because they often feature very beautiful traditional sacred art and they comment on it. And so similarly, Benedictus, you know, we want to share with Catholics some of these magnificent images, these paintings of saints or feasts, and so that every cover will have, you know, a full color image like that. As like the one, you know, in the sample issue that people can check out at the praybenedictus.com website. But it also has little woodcuts, you know, of the Sacred Heart or of a chalice or of a host or all sorts of things throughout the book, the way that you see in the classic hand missals. So there are little touches of beauty throughout. It's not just text. I think a lot of care has been put already into that sample issue and will increasingly be put in over time, you know, to make it something that is pleasing to look at, you know, in its font, in its graphics, and all that sort of thing, right?
So perhaps could I ask you to reply to an objection?
Sure.
And so what would you say to someone who listens to this and says, well, you know, it sounds like you're a PhD, you're a great musician, you're very educated. This all sounds like the traditional Mass is just for smart people. It's just for people that can appreciate all this. How would you respond, and how could Benedictus help answer that objection?
Yeah, no, it's funny because people sometimes think that way.
Yeah.
But when they actually come to the Latin Mass, and if they just let themselves be there for a time, you know, not just once, but several times, maybe a few months, what grows on them is this awareness of the tremendous sacredness and majesty of what's going on. And that's a language that's universal. That language speaks to everybody. It spoke to the Native Americans when the first missionaries came. I mean, at least those Native Americans who converted, as opposed to the ones who killed them. And it spoke to the Japanese and the Chinese when the missionaries came, right? It's a universal language of worship, of reverence, of sacredness, of homage to God, and of penitence, of petition. So I think really there's just a whole atmosphere with the old liturgy that helps us to pray. It actually is much less intellectually demanding in a certain sense, because it helps us, as you were saying, with sensible signs, with you know, we can catch on to it, like, you know, like the woman who touches the garment of Jesus to be healed. There's a lot of garment to touch, you know, to hold on to with the old Mass, you know. And so that being said, it's also true that there's a lot more in it that we need to access, or that we will benefit from accessing. And that's where I think, you know, there is a steep climb. You know, if you really want to, if you want to just go to a Mass that's reverent and beautiful and quiet, where you can pray, you don't have to have Benedictus, and you don't have to have a daily missal. But if you want to know more and you want to go further, then I think Benedictus would be an ideal way to do that. Most people find large missals intimidating.
Yes.
And it's not that it's impossible to figure it out. I mean, you can figure it out, but if you could have, especially for, as I said, for newcomers or for families or for little children who are just getting used to reading the propers, if you had a tool that made it as easy as possible, right? Just one page at a time, then that would be a huge boon. And then you add the commentaries, which are always changing from month to month. You add the morning and evening devotions, you add the poetry that's going to be in there, which I haven't even mentioned yet. And you've got something that no hand missal can actually accomplish, right? Because the hand missal is just 2,000 pages of fixed text, right? So I think it's, in a way, Benedictus is like, it's like one of those Swiss Army knives, that's, 25 uses, right? I mean, it's for the newbies, it's for the children, it's for the families, it's for, at home devotions. I mean, it's for all kinds of purposes. In that sense, trying to be, it's like St. Paul talking about being all things to all men. I mean, it's not going to be, maybe it's not going to do the one thing that somebody wants it to do, but it will do 100 other things that other people want to do. So yes. I think, it's kind of like, if it's useful to you, go ahead and get it and check it out. I do encourage people to make a subscription, because for this to succeed, and I'm sure you understand this as a publisher yourself, there's a certain economy of scale that's necessary. It's expensive to print a magazine like that with so many pages, and to pay the team that's going to make it beautiful and useful. And so if you want to bring the price down to a nice price point, you've got to have a lot of subscribers. So what Sophia is aiming for is 5,000 subscribers initially. They hope to get to 50,000 eventually, wherever it will go. But they need 5,000 to make it financially viable. My understanding is that they're doing very well so far in getting subscriptions, but it's still not at that level. So I think, I just want to say, try it for a year. And if it ends up being helpful, it's probably going to be very helpful to somebody in your family, in your immediate family, your extended family, your circle of friends. I think priests should buy a box of them. They're bulk discounts, for boxes of like 20 copies or something. You can get a good discount on that, and put it out in the foyer of the church. One thing I would say is traditional Catholics are not always great at outreach. Yes. I mean, we sort of find our pearl of great price. We sell a lot for it, sell everything for it, go and find our pearl of great price, and then we hunker down with it. We're just so happy to have it that we maybe don't think about ways to be evangelizing and ways to be promoting this treasure. And Benedictus seems to me like a beautiful, painless way of encouraging others.
Excellent. No, and when you referred to that quote from St. Paul, that was actually going through my mind as I flipped through the sample issue, that it really is something that, maybe get back to my earlier question, it's not something that's going to intimidate, because it's not like the liturgy is a test, right, where you have to know everything and answer everything. It's so rich that, in fact, you can't do that. As you said, I've been going to traditional Mass for decades, and I experienced Masses that I've been to many years before and find something new. Mm-hmm. So what this offers is all of these things, and you don't have to approach it like, I need to read all this and read cover to cover and understand this. You find what speaks to you at each particular day, or as you said, morning prayers or Mass. Right. And it's so rich that you can never exhaust it.
Exactly. And I do think, just in terms of a piece of advice, I always say this to people, you have to just give up entirely the idea that you're going to follow everything.
Yes.
That's not necessary. It's not even helpful. Just take each thing that comes to you that's helpful to you, and hold on to it and ponder that. Because, the Mass, I mean, God willing, the Mass is not going anywhere, and we have a lifetime of worship. So, and you're going to get the same Masses year after year after year. Thanks be to God. There isn't this 2-year cycle, 3-year cycle, and whoever the cantor is and the priest is all going to be different. No, it's always the same. Yes. So you get a chance again and again and again to go deeper and deeper. That's one of the traditional Masses' hugest advantages, is its stability, right? It is stable. So it's almost like the sun in the solar system, and the planets can go around it, right? It's stable. Well, I mean, unless you're a geocentric, but I'm not going to get into that.
We won't get into that, yes. But no, in many ways, I found it eventually very liberating when you realize actually, it doesn't matter what I'm doing. Like this is not dependent on me keeping up or doing that. That
Yes.
it has a life of its own,
Mhm.
and what I do and how I approach it, I can benefit from and can benefit me. But there's no sort of pressure on you. As you said, you can if something particularly attracts you, particular verse from one of the Psalms in a Mass, or a particular meditation in this Benedictus, for example, on the Gospel, you can just give in and let that be efficacious for you, because as you said,
Yes.
the liturgy will move on and it'll be back next year and you can focus on something else. And
Yeah,
so,
that's right. Yeah, it's ironic, isn't it, that
yes,
for modern people there's such a constant
yeah,
appetite, a hue and
yes,
cry for freedom.
yes,
But the old liturgy has much more freedom to it for the laity. There's a lot of it's a whole kind of like an open space
yes,
in which we can just be, you know, children of God and just worship. It's great. But anyway,
yes. Well, maybe as we wrap up, just a few practical points. So you mentioned printing. So do you receive this only in print form, or is there an electronic version, or how does it?
yes, good questions. So the just to reiterate, the issue online is a sample issue. The first
Yes.
full issue will be August's issue,
Okay.
and that will ship out in July. So of course it will always come a month earlier so that you're not getting it late in the mail. And that's especially important now because, as you know,
Yes.
mail is not very reliable
Yes.
anymore. So the August issue will come in July. So if people subscribe now, they're really subscribing to get the issue in July for
Okay.
August. But there will be, they're developing an online version for people who want to use it on their tablet or their smartphone or whatever.
Hmm.
Personally, I mean, I wouldn't do that, but I know that there are a lot of people who are really into
Hmm.
that. And that's fine. You know, it's good to meet people where they're at,
Yes.
provide it in different media, different formats. But yeah, so the print edition and then the electronic edition, as I understand it. It's also currently only available in the United States. But I mean,
Okay.
there, of course, Sophia is getting a lot of questions from people in England, in Canada, in
Sure.
Australia, in
Yes.
Ireland, people who want to have this resource. And I know they want to make it available to them. They need to figure out how to do that effectively. So,
Yes, it's tricky, particularly when you have to mail, and getting it to people in time so that it's there is difficult. So as was just mentioned, if you want to subscribe, here is the website where you can find it. And you can subscribe, just hit subscribe now, or you can learn more to get more of that information. But here again is where you would sign up now if you want to get the first official issue for July to be used in August. You would sign up here, and then you won't have to worry about it, and just sit back and it will be here, and you can begin benefiting from the resource in August, with the first Sunday of August. So again, this is a project many people, as I said, something like this could not be put together without many people, but is being sponsored by Sophia Press, who's done a lot of really good publishing work. We've been trying to highlight the past year, and really excellent experts on the liturgy, such as Dr. Kwasniewski, who we appreciate you spending the time today to share your experience. Any
yes.
final thoughts before we go?
No. I just think that, you know, Summorum Pontificum, you know, whatever its limitations may be, it's the gift that keeps on giving. You know,
Yes, yes,
and this is the latest fruit hanging on
yes,
that tree. So
yes. Well, thank you. And again, if you've enjoyed this program, please like it, share it. You never know whose inbox a link to this may end up in, and they may benefit from finding out about Benedictus. So please forward it, like the video so that it's brought to other people's attention. And then if you do enjoy our free online content, I encourage you to subscribe to our monthly newspaper, Catholic Family News, which often explores many of these topics we'll have in our weekly reports and our special reports in much greater detail. So again, if you've enjoyed this, please consider a monthly subscription. So again, thank you, and hopefully we can have you back another time on to discuss another topic.
wonderful. Thank you, Brian. God bless.
You too.
Ite missa est, alleluia, alleluia.